Hi, I'm Tony Northrup, and today I'm going to give you a free 1-hour tutorial about Canon Powershot cameras, how to use them. I'm going to get you started in photography. If you have a different camera, or if you have a friend who has a camera and you want to share a similar tutorial with them, send them to sdp.io/tutorials. We have tutorials like this for almost every digital camera that you can buy. At least there'll be something similar there. I have a Canon Powershot SX510 in my hand, but I'm going to make this tutorial for almost all Powershot cameras because they're all very similar, and frankly there are just dozens of different models and I can't make a tutorial for every single one. So briefly, I'm going to talk about each of the different models and what they look like so that you'll see your specific Powershot model and you'll know how it differs. If you want to jump forward to a different part of the tutorial, you don't have to sit through all this. Check the description below. You'll see links to different parts of it. So if you already know some stuff, you can skip right ahead. At the end in particular, we recommend accessories like a flash and tripod and such for the camera. And you might just want to skip ahead to that if that's more what you're most interested in. This is the Canon Powershot ELPHs, and they have the most basic controls. So you won't see the mode dial here, and they don't have a pop-up flash. They have a flash that's built right in. Otherwise, they're basically capable and they'll be able to do everything that we teach. The SX400 models look very much like this, except the biggest difference is they're missing this mode dial on top. Again, very capable cameras. The SX510 and the other 500 series cameras look like this, and they add a mode dial as well as basic controls like exposure compensation controls on the back. The SX610 goes back to being small, or each of these is a series. So it's like SX600, SX610, SX620. So just look at that first numeric digit in there to know which family your camera belongs to. These also lack the mode dial, but they're more compact, so the lens folds right in. But otherwise, the buttons and dials should look basically identical to what I'm showing today. And at the higher end, the SX710, again, it's compact. It has the mode dial, but it's on the back. Otherwise, everything should look pretty much the same. It has a pop-up flash. And the SX60, as we get into fewer digits, you get into the more and more expensive cameras. The SX60 has pretty much everything we've discussed here. It's just a slightly more serious camera with that articulating pop-out screen, which is really useful for things like video. This tutorial will work for any of these cameras. I'm not going to cover every single feature in the camera because they tend to pack a lot of features in these cameras that most people won't find that useful. So I'm not going to show you how to use the miniature toy effect that's in it, or the fisheye effect. You can feel free to have fun with those, but I'm going to focus on the core parts of photography that you really need to get good pictures and skip all the gimmicks. I won't cover Wi-Fi in this video, but I'm planning to record a general Canon Wi-Fi video. So if you're watching this when it's brand new, I won't have that yet, but if you're watching it a month later, check sdp.io/tutorials, that link I gave you earlier, and you should be able to find the Wi-Fi tutorial. Up first, we'll talk about actually getting your camera set up. When you first unbox it, you'll need to insert the memory card and battery. Pull this bottom part out to the side here and it will flip open. Both the memory card and battery are stored in the same compartment. You want to make sure your battery is charged up, and I find the battery works well. It doesn't last that long if you're shooting. If you're out on vacation, you might even want to get an extra battery. Just keep this on the charger whenever you can. You cannot USB charge these cameras like you could, say, your smartphone. Insert it in here with the arrow pointing in and the Canon label towards the back. And as you push it all the way in, it should click right in there. Now your memory card, it takes SD memory cards. You don't need to spend money on an expensive memory card. Even a smaller memory card like a 16 gig memory card should be just fine. These SanDisk 32 gig memory cards go for about $10. So honestly, I wouldn't spend more than $10 on a memory card for this camera. The faster, the higher quality ones, they just won't make any difference for you. Push that in until you hear it click, and then it will stay in there. Push it again to make it pop out. Then fold that closed and snap it shut, and you're basically ready to go. Now, a lot of people will want to buy a case for this camera, and you certainly could, but these cameras tend to be really durable, and one of the problems with a case and even a lens cap is they slow you down from taking a picture. So my preferred way of using them is just to put a strap on the camera and keep it around my shoulder, and I generally don't use a lens cap. I'm not going to stop you from doing that, but I like to keep my camera at the ready, and you'll find that the optics won't get scratched up. And even if somehow they did get scratched up, it probably wouldn't impact the vast majority of your pictures. So I would err on the side of keeping my camera ready rather than protecting it. There are two physical ports on this computer, a USB and an HDMI port. Over on the right side here, underneath the grip, pop this rubber panel out. On top, you'll see a USB port that you can use with the included USB cable to connect the camera directly to your computer. That's mostly useful for copying pictures from your camera to your computer. The other outlet here is for HDMI. HDMI is what you would use to connect it to a TV. For example, if you were on vacation or even at home and you wanted to show your family your pictures but not on the back of the screen on the actual TV, you would take a little HDMI cable, like I think it's a micro HDMI cable, connect it from here into the TV, and then you could play it back. I find that's generally not worth the trouble. Nowadays, people would rather just look at the pictures on the back of the camera than have like a full sit-down slideshow. So I don't feel like either one of these ports will necessarily get a use for most of you. I personally don't usually use the USB cable to connect it to my computer. I will instead get a memory card reader and just pop this memory card out and put that into my computer. I find it just faster and easier, but it's a matter of preference. The USB works fine too. At the end of the video, I'll recommend a memory card reader for you if you decide to do that. Now let's take our first picture. To turn it on, there's an on-off button here. We'll just push that. The lens will move out, and now it's making a little sound. And now taking a picture is really simple. I'm pulling the dial next to the shutter button here to move it in, and then I'll actually push this halfway to focus and then all the way to take a picture. So as I push it halfway here, see it focuses. The box there turns green to mean it's focused. And then I push it all the way to actually take a picture. Let's take a real picture of our cameraman Justin. Show you the behind the scenes here. If you want to review your picture, hit the play button here. The play button will let you look at your past picture. And there he is, that's Justin. You can scroll through the different pictures by moving the dial here. If you want to erase it, you'll see a blue trash can icon there. Push that and it will prompt you to cancel your erase or to actually erase it. Just scroll to the right and then hit the function set button here in the middle to select it. But I like that picture, so I'm going to keep it. If you want more information about the picture, like you want to see a histogram, something we explain in chapter 4 of my book that I'll describe in just a bit, hit the disp button down here. And press it once and it will show you the date and time that it was taken. Push it again, and now you can see the actual technical details of it. So you can see the histogram here, which shows you how much dark and bright is in the picture. So there are some dark parts of these pictures, the acoustic foam in the background, and that shows up as a spike over on the left. The left side of the histogram means dark. The right side of the histogram means bright stuff. So we can see we have this TV here and the wall is pretty bright. And that's why we see it kind of building up, because there's more and more bright throughout the picture. You can see the stats of the picture. It was in automatic mode, but the camera chose ISO 800, f5, and 1/25 of a second, as well as the time and resolution of the picture. That's the basics of taking and reviewing your pictures, and really that's most of what you'll need to know to get great pictures. That's most of the technical stuff that you'll need to know, because most of the valuable stuff in photography is more artistic. Now, if you want to take a portrait, you can just use the automatic mode. You don't need to really sweat it, because the way this camera and lens work, it's probably going to be using ideal settings for a portrait, even in automatic mode. But if you just want to be sure, what you can do is use this mode dial and scroll it over to Scene, SCN. And by default, the scene is for portraits, but you can hit the function set button here and it will pull up the different modes. So you can see portrait mode is the default, and that will basically help blur the background a little bit. But because of the way the lens is on these cameras, you're not going to get a huge amount of background blur. You'd have to get a bigger camera with an interchangeable lens if you wanted good background blur, but it's still plenty good for most portraits. Anyway, that's the setting that you'll use for taking a portrait. If you want to take a landscape, I would just go back to the auto mode here. Again, for landscapes, the default auto settings should be just fine. We'll talk a little bit about how to use Aperture Priority mode later. If for some reason you're getting that deep into it and you're not happy with the settings in auto, but auto mode will get you there most of the time. For sports, this camera can be really difficult to use for sports. They all have good zoom lenses, so you can get in nice and tight, but they don't have a great focusing system for tracking action. You would have to jump up to an interchangeable lens camera if you wanted to be able to reliably take pictures of subjects moving towards you. Now, if a subject is still, it's going to work just fine. So if you want to take a picture of your grandson and he's batting in baseball, zoom in all the way and just take a picture in full auto mode, and it should look great. But if you wanted to track him as he's running from home plate to first base, it's probably going to miss focus. So you can go ahead and try to get the shot, and it might be close enough to being sharp or in focus, but those sorts of moving shots are more productive on higher-end cameras with interchangeable lenses. These point-and-shoot cameras are more for still subjects. It does have modes that will allow you to technically track moving subjects, but I find they don't work very well, and they work. In fact, I generally don't recommend them. For night photography, this camera has manual mode. So we'll talk about manual mode in just a little bit, but it's the M here. And this will allow you to manually set your shutter speed and ISO. It also has a low light mode, but if you read through my book, Stunning Digital Photography, you'll find that I recommend using manual mode for night photography, and it's just not that hard to do, so don't be scared away by it. You could use the low light mode if you wanted to, but for most people, I'm just going to recommend using manual mode, something I'll describe in just a bit. It doesn't have to be scary. It also has something that I find really cool, which is discrete mode. Discrete mode turns off all sounds from the camera, making it completely silent. And this is good if you're shooting candid at, say, somebody's birthday party, and you know, sometimes you pull out the camera and you're taking pictures and everybody feels like they have to smile, and then it becomes all unnatural. It's also good if you're doing street photography and you don't want to disturb the people that you're photographing, so that you can actually get candid and natural moments. So let's take a look at how to turn on discrete mode. Discrete mode is the icon here with the guy, and he's making like the hush symbol. So pick that on the top here, and now when you take a picture, no beeping, just the tiniest little sound of a shutter. And if you're, please, as a wedding photographer, please put it in discrete mode if you're taking pictures at a wedding or a ceremony of some kind, because there's nothing worse than having the whole crowd filled up with beep, 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 beep. Discrete mode, very useful. Now we'll go get into what they call the creative modes on the camera, and these modes give you full or as much control as you want of how the lens and camera are functioning and the settings that they're choosing. These don't matter as much as they do on cameras with interchangeable lenses, because this lens, it isn't a big, huge lens that has lots of flexibility. It's a very powerful lens, and it will get the job done for you. If you're working along in Stunning Digital Photography and you want to learn how to use these modes, I'll show you how. But for those of you who just want to get good pictures, you can probably just skip ahead past manual mode. To select Aperture Priority mode, you're going to move the mode dial here over to a V. Now, if you have one of the Powershot cameras that doesn't have a mode dial, this simply isn't an option for you. But as I was just saying, it's probably not that important. But for those of you who do have the mode dial, select AV. And now you can use the dial on the back of the camera to control the aperture. So at the very bottom here, you'll see it says f3.4. That's a measurement of the aperture. The lower f-stop numbers, like f3.4, open up the opening of the lens, which is like the iris of your eye, to let in more and more light. Higher f-stop numbers close it down to let in less and less light. The other major side effect, besides the amount of light coming into the lens, is what they call the depth of field. How sharp or blurry the background is. So at low f-stop numbers, like f3.4, the background will be more blurry, and at high f-stop numbers, the background will be more sharp. You can think of the f-stop as controlling the background sharpness. High f-stop number, high background sharpness. Low f-stop number, low background sharpness. Now, if you were to take pictures at f3.4 and f8 on this camera, I'll do that now. That's at f3.4 and then at f8. And for both of those, I focused on the monitor here. And we can see some objects in the background there. And to my eye, I can't see that one is more in focus than the other. They both look very sharp. And that's because this lens and sensor combination are never going to create a whole lot of background blur. And for that reason, this camera is usually going to be happier. You're going to get better pictures using lower f-stop numbers. So feel free to switch to aperture priority mode and select higher f-stop numbers, but most of the time, you're going to be getting the best images when you let it get all the light that it can by using f3.4. Now, if you do want to blur the background, you'll have better luck if you actually zoom in some. So I'm just zooming in some. And as I focus on the monitor now and take a picture, you can see when I'm zoomed in, the lowest f-stop number is now f5.6 instead of f3.4. It'll vary depending on how much you're zoomed in. So as I was zoomed in here and I took pictures at f5.6 and f8, you can see at f5.6 the camera in the background there is very slightly out of focus, and at f8 it's very slightly sharper. On a professional level camera, you might see a huge difference. You'd have a background that was completely blurry or completely sharp. On this camera, the differences are going to be very slight, and that's why you don't necessarily have to worry about it that much. It makes it a little easier to not have to worry about it, in fact. That's how you use aperture priority mode. Shutter priority mode is much more useful on this particular camera because shutter priority mode gives you complete control over how long the shutter is open. It allows you to freeze fast-moving action, eliminating any motion blur from your subject, or it allows you to leave the shutter open for a long time, showing the motion of somebody's arm throwing or the wings of a flapping bird. To select shutter priority, this will not make a lot of sense, but select TV. TV stands for like time value. It would make a lot more sense if Canon did what other manufacturers do and they just labeled it with S. But anyway, shutter priority is labeled with TV here. And with TV selected, you can see right now it's set to 1/40th of a second. I can move the main dial here to the left to select longer shutter speeds. Like now it's set at a full 10 seconds. 10 seconds is something you'd use if you were photographing stars, really dark subjects. I can scroll it to the right, clockwise, and go past 1 second and get faster and faster, all the way up to 1/1600th of a second, which would be enough to freeze the flapping of most birds' wings or to freeze the wheels on a fast-moving car. You could, if you were taking pictures of sports, put it into shutter priority mode and pick the fastest shutter speed. But a fast shutter speed is letting very little light into the camera because the shutter itself is open for a very little amount of time. And cameras like these especially need all the light they can get. Therefore, in general, you want to use the slowest shutter speed you possibly can that will freeze the motion of the subject and the movement of your hands as you're hand holding the camera. So for that reason, I try to use a slow shutter speed. For general shooting, you could use 1/60th of a second, or even 1/30th of a second, depending on how steady your hands are and how much you're zoomed in. If you're shooting sports, especially like sports for little kids, like kids soccer, kids basketball, 1/250th of a second is a good choice. As they get older, as they get into middle school and high school, they move faster and faster, and you might want to move up to 1/500th of a second. Professional level sports, you might need to be at 1/1000th of a second. Above that, flying birds, you'd want to be as fast as possible at 1/1600th of a second. But for perched birds, you could probably shoot at 1/250th of a second or even 1/125th of a second, again, depending on how much you're zoomed in and how steady your hands are. As a general rule, if you're using shutter priority and your pictures are coming out blurry, if they're showing movement in the pictures, you want to use a faster shutter speed. Manual mode gives you control over both the shutter speed and the aperture, and it can be very useful on any camera. Those power shots with the mode dial, just select the mode dial and move it over to M. Now, by default, you'll use the main dial here, scroll it right to select a faster shutter speed or left to select a slower shutter speed. You can see as I'm doing this, the screen is getting brighter and brighter. And then darker and darker as I move it to the right because the slower shutter speed lets less light in. You didn't see that when I was demonstrating shutter priority mode, because in shutter priority mode, the camera will automatically compensate with other settings to keep the exposure the same. If you want to change your aperture in manual mode, hit this plus minus button there. And now it'll switch control from the shutter speed to aperture. So now I can scroll it from f4 to f8. those specific values will depend on the camera you have and how much you're zoomed in. And when you're ready, at that point, you can now just take a picture. If you're working through stunning digital photography and using this tutorial, you'll see I'll make some references to bulb mode. These Powershot cameras lack a bulb mode, which isn't necessarily a huge problem. You can always take multiple different pictures and stack them together in post. So if you needed to make a 5-minute exposure, you could take 10 30-second exposures and then stack them together using a technique called mean averaging. This requires some skill with Photoshop, but it's not that hard. Check chapter 9 of Stunning Digital Photography for more information about using mean averaging to make up for that bulb mode. So speaking of stunning digital photography, I'll take just a second to plug my books. Today I'm going through the controls on the camera, and that's what people want to know when they get a new camera is which buttons and dials do I push to get great pictures? But I can tell you which buttons and dials to push to get different effects, but that will not make great pictures because photography is more art than science. Things like lighting and composition, posing, emotion, expression, storytelling, these are the most important parts of photography, and those are the things that make great pictures, memorable pictures. Those are the things that will make you capture what you actually see for future generations or for sharing on Facebook. And those are things that I teach in my book, Stunning Digital Photography. You can get the electronic version of it, the ebook version, for less than $10. If you don't like learning from books, it's something special that you might never have seen before. It's a video book. And it comes with over 14 hours of video. And it will teach you everything. So you can read it as a book, or you can just watch the videos, whichever you prefer to, however you prefer to learn. Or you can do some of both for best effect. Read along and then jump to a specific video that will help you better understand a topic. And if you're not happy with it, you can always ask for a refund and I'll happily give you your money back. For those of you who are more social learners who like to be handheld and have somebody actually answer questions for you, we have a special Facebook group just for readers of the book for everybody to help themselves out. My wife and I and the whole team are on there too, trying to answer your questions and giving you feedback on your picture. So if you have a picture that doesn't work out, you can go into our Facebook group that comes with this book and ask for help, and more than likely somebody will be able to help you out. Please do check it out at sdp.io/store, or just if you want to see reviews, just go to Amazon and search for my name, Tony Northrup, or search for Stunning Digital Photography, and you'll see there's over 1,300 reviews with a 5-star average. People really, really enjoy the book, and we really do our best to help people learn. So do check that out and learn everything about photography that I'm not going to teach you. Everything is not a button or dial. So I taught you how to use the Aperture Priority, Shutter Priority, Manual Mode. Now we'll go over the different shutter modes. You can control the shutter modes by, first I'll put this back into Program Mode here, which is my favorite mode with the P. To select the shutter modes, hit the Function Set button in the middle here. And now you can scroll up or down through a long list of settings. This thing with the box, that's your drive mode, which is your shutter mode. So I'll select that and then scroll to the right. And you can see I can choose between single shot, which will take one picture for every time I push the shutter button, continuous, which will take multiple pictures, or continuous shooting AF. And if you wanted to try to take a picture of Bobby running from home base to first, you would go in here and select continuous shooting AF. Go ahead and give it a try. I would bet that you wouldn't have great luck. I generally prefer the single focus mode, but I'll select continuous now. And so now when I hold the shutter down and take a picture, you'll hear, there you go. See, it takes multiple pictures quickly. And that's the mode I will always leave the camera in. I like continuous shooting. Even if I'm just taking a portrait, somebody smiling, I'll go ahead and rattle off 4 or 5 pictures because there will be small micro expressions that will make all the difference in the picture. Somebody will switch between having a completely natural smile to having a little bit unnatural or forced smile. And if you grab 5 pictures, you can always pick the best one. After all, it doesn't cost you anything to take individual pictures. So go ahead and switch it into continuous mode now, and hopefully you can just leave it there. The camera does have a couple of different focusing modes, and the default settings are where I prefer to leave these Powershot cameras. However, you can configure it to track moving focus, and one way to do that is what I just showed you, which is to hit the function set, go to the drive mode, and then select continuous shooting AF. As I select that, as I'm shooting, it will focus in between shots. even though I'm holding my finger down on the shutter, it will keep trying to focus. You can also configure the focusing speed by hitting the menu button, and then under the camera icon here, you can go down and select Servo AF and Continuous AF. And if you want to focus on a moving subject, you would set both of those to on. Servo AF can be kind of unreliable for still subjects. It will continually try to track a moving subject, even if they're standing still, which will mean if somebody is standing still, you'll end up missing focus more often than not. So for most subjects, I will leave Servo AF on. But for things like sports, if somebody is moving and you really want to get the best shot of that, I would go ahead and turn Servo AF on from the menu there. This camera also has manual focus. Not all the Powershot cameras do, but on the back of the camera, if you see a little label like that, MF, you can just push that and then scroll over to MF. And now you can select that and then move up or down to manually focus it. So you can see here, I'm moving closer and closer, and it's zooming in the middle there to show me what it looks like up close. You can see it can't quite focus that close. Every camera has a minimum focusing distance, but by pushing up and down or scrolling this wheel, it will control where the camera is focusing. So I never use manual focus on these cameras. I'll always work with the autofocus system. But if for some reason you decide you do want to use manual focus, I just wanted to show you where it actually was. Now let's talk about the metering modes. Metering modes are something, even if you have a high-end professional camera, I don't recommend people take the time to use. I recommend just leaving it on the default for all cameras, including this camera. But if you're the person who wants to experiment with metering modes, I'll just show you where it is. Hit the function set button here, and then scroll through the settings until you find this top setting here, light metering. And if I scroll to the right here, I can switch between evaluative, center weighted average, and spot metering. And I won't bother to describe them here. I describe them more in Chapter 3 of Stunning Digital Photography if you want to learn them. But evaluative will work for the vast majority of situations. You can also manually change your ISO. The ISO is the camera's sensitivity to light. So a high ISO basically amplifies the light that it's getting, allowing you to take a handheld picture with a fast shutter speed even at night. At low ISOs, the camera gathers much more light, giving you much cleaner images. The camera by default is configured for auto ISO, so it'll just set that for you. And again, this is the kind of thing I will usually leave to automatic, even on higher end professional cameras. So you can just leave ISO and never worry about it. You don't have to dedicate the brain cells to learn how to use ISO. But if you get into stunning digital photography and you do want to learn how to use ISO, just push the ISO button here. You can see it's right at the top of this dial. And now I can scroll up through all the way through ISO 3200 on this camera. Or I can select a nice low ISO, like this camera has ISO 80, and that will give me nice clean images, but potentially slower shutter speeds. So I like auto ISO on this camera, so I'm going to go back in and select auto ISO there. Now I'll show you how to use exposure compensation. If you've ever taken a picture and it was too dark or too bright, exposure compensation can fix that for you. And it's really easy to use. The camera will always try to auto expose. It'll look at the scene and try to figure out the most important part of the picture and then expose that properly. But it's a camera. It's like a little computer. It's not smart like you. You can look at a picture and know, oh, I want my niece's face in the foreground there to be a little bit brighter. She looks too dark. The way to fix that is to hit the plus or minus button here. And now you can dial in positive or negative exposure compensation. So as you look at the screen here, you can see that's kind of grayish white now. If I scroll to the right, that's going to get brighter and brighter. So you would just move that up or down until you were happy with the brightness of the picture. If I scroll all the way left, it's going to be very dark. It will go between 0, which is the default setting, all the way up to positive 2 stops or negative 2 stops. Real quickly, a stop is a doubling or halving of the light. So at plus 2 stops, at plus 1 stop, it'll gather twice as much light, and at plus 2 stops, it'll gather 4 times more light, giving you significantly brighter pictures. After you take a picture with the exposure compensation dialed in, be sure to hit that button again and return it to 0, because you don't want to add exposure compensation or subtract it and then forget and then pick it up the next day and go to take pictures because everything will be over or underexposed. So just be sure you always go back in and reset that. Most of these cameras have a flash built in, not all of them. Some of them have it built right into the body and it's just always exposed and you don't have to turn it on. Or you'll turn it on by hitting the flash icon here. Some of them, like this model, have a pop-up flash, so you have to just physically pick up with your hands. Once it's exposed like that, the flash can fire. You still might want to turn it on manually. There's a button here on the side. The lightning bolt is the universal symbol for flash. So I'll select that and I can choose between auto, which allows the camera to decide that it needs to add flash. The second option here is on, which means the flash will fire every single time. And the third option here is slow synchro, which means it'll properly expose the background, but fire the flash for the foreground subjects. That's important because the flash, if you're taking a picture of your husband standing, a quarter mile in front of the Eiffel Tower, the flash will not illuminate the Eiffel Tower, but it will illuminate your husband. So if you were to use the flash in auto or on mode, then you would see your well-lit husband and the Eiffel Tower would be completely black. You wouldn't see it at all. But if you were to select slow synchro, that would expose both the foreground and the background and allow it to be better balanced. You'll almost always want to use the slow synchro for just better image quality, but at a close range where you don't care about the background, if you're shooting your friends at a bar or something, the standard on mode or auto mode will work just fine. With the flash turned on, as long as I still have it up, I can take a picture and the flash will fire for me. When you're ready to turn it off, just push the flash back down if you have a model that exposes the flash that way. If you take a picture and the flash is blindingly bright and it's just ruining your picture because there's too much flash in the picture, dial in flash exposure compensation. This allows you just to turn down the flash output, so it won't completely blind everybody and blow out everybody's faces and overexpose everybody. To do that, well, make sure you have the flash turned on. Then hit the function set button and scroll down until you see the lightning bolt and the plus or minus symbol. This is for flash exposure compensation. So now I can scroll to the right and I can either dial in more flash. I don't know why anybody would want more flash. Or dial in less flash. And I actually like to keep it at -1 1/3 stops because I find that these cameras tend to add too much flash and they tend to overexpose people's faces. And in general, I'm happier with a little bit less flash than the default settings. But once you understand that by reading through Chapter 3 of Stunning Digital Photography, you'll know when to use flash exposure compensation and when to just leave it at the defaults. Let's talk about white balance a little bit. Your eyes will see a white piece of paper as white, whether you're in full sunlight or you're under incandescent lights. But your brain is kind of tricking you because your brain has an auto white balance feature where it just compensates for whatever lighting you're in. The truth is, we decided that the sun itself defines what white is. Incandescent lights are actually kind of yellow. Fluorescent lights are a little yellow and a little green. And LED lights tend to be a little bit towards blue. So that white piece of paper would look yellow or green or blue a little bit if you were under some different kind of light. But your brain fixes this for you, and the camera tries to fix that difference for you too. The auto white balance setting works well on these cameras, and you should never need to change it. But if you do want to change it, hit the function set button again, and then scroll up to where right now it says AWB. Select that. AWB is auto white balance. And now you can just scroll through the different light situations and pick the light that matches the environment that you're in. So if you're shooting with tungsten, you could select that setting. And you can see the screen here is white, but as I set it to tungsten, it ends up looking kind of blue because it's compensating for a color that doesn't actually exist. Cloudy will fix the color on a cloudy day, which cloudy days tend to be a little bit cooler, a little bit more blue. That's how you would select the white balance, but again, auto white balance is right for most things. And if you do change the white balance, when you're done, be sure to set it back to auto white balance. Now let's talk about how to record video. For the most part, it's really easy. You have a special video mode here on some cameras, the video mode dial. So I'll just put it over to the video camera thing here. And then it's as easy as just hitting the big record button here. If you don't have the mode dial, you can just hit the record button. It's super easy. So as I hit that, you can see it just starts recording video. The video you'll get out of these cameras is really good quality. I would suggest you pick up a tripod for your camera. That will definitely improve the video quality by eliminating the shakiness of your hands. You might also zoom back a little bit because, especially when you're on the telephoto end of these cameras, the video can look particularly shaky and nobody likes to see shaky video. The memory card in your camera is your digital film. And if you were around in the film days, you could get 24 or 36 picture rolls. Any memory card you put in these things will take like more than 1,000 pictures. So you don't have to change out the film all that often. If you fill up your memory card and you unload your pictures to a computer and you have that backed up someplace safe, you can format the memory card to completely erase it. To format it, hit the menu button here, then scroll over to the wrench and hammer icons and scroll down until you get to format. Select that, and then it's going to warn you, format memory card, because it's going to erase all of your pictures pretty much forever. So you'll just scroll over to OK and then select that when you're ready to absolutely erase everything. I don't want to erase everything, so I'm going to select cancel. If you accidentally format your memory card, don't freak out too much. You can probably recover your pictures. Check chapter 5 of my book, Stunning Digital Photography, for tips on how to recover pictures lost from a memory card. Now let's talk about how to disable that beep. As I've been navigating the menus, you've been hearing like beep, 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 and every time it focuses, you'll hear that beep. And some people like that, but I don't need it because I can see the green box means that it's focused. And also, I find the beep to be terribly annoying. It disturbs people around you, especially at quiet ceremonies and such. You could turn it off. Hit the menu button, go back to the wrench and hammer icons at the top, and then scroll down to mute. Just scroll to the left to set mute to on. And now it's silent. It won't beep as it focuses. Just look for that green box and you'll know it's focused. And thanks for turning that beep off. Now, one of the things you might want to do if you have a computer is load the pictures from your camera to your computer. And whether you're on Windows or Mac, there's probably some software built in that will help you, but I can suggest a much better alternative that's also free. It's really easy to use, and it just makes even cleaning up your pictures, fixing exposure problems, cropping them, it makes it so much easier. It's called Google Picasa. It's made by Google, and they do it for you for free, and it works really well. You can check it out at sdp.io/Picasa. Chapter 1 of Stunning Digital Photography has a quick overview of that tool that will get you started for it. If you want to load your pictures from your camera to a computer, you can either use that USB port that I showed you on the side and connect that to your computer, or if you're like me, you might prefer to take the memory card out. If you want to take it out, you'll want a memory card reader. This is the memory card reader we use. It's USB 3, so it's very fast, and it's only $12. You can pick it up at sdp.io/reader. If you're not using a computer, if you want to edit your pictures on a mobile phone, I'll show you devices to get your pictures from your camera, from your memory card to your phone, whether it's an Android tablet, smartphone, or an iPhone, or an iPad. First out, for those of us using Android phones like the Samsung S5, S6, or Android tablets like the Kindle Fire, pick up this Android reader. It's only $5, and it will allow you to take the SD cards from here and connect it in there. And then you can use a variety of different image management apps on your phone or tablet to edit your pictures and organize them and then share them on Facebook. You can pick one up at sdp.io/AndroidSD. If you have one of the newer iPhones or iPads that have these little lightning connectors, the little smaller connectors that fit in either way where you don't have to put them in the right way, go to sdp.io/AppleSD to get a memory card reader for those devices. If you have an older iPad or iPhone that have the wider connectors that you have to worry about turning them right side up, go to sdp.io/iPadSD. Those will each cost you about $30, a little more than the Android devices. In Chapter 3 of Stunning Digital Photography, I talk about how to use bounce flash to get great results out of flash, because the built-in flash here will pretty much always blind people and leave you with a dark background and kind of wash out their faces. You can seriously upgrade the flash by using a flash with an optical slave. Now, a couple of the Powershots actually have what they call a hot shoe to connect a flash to the top, but most of them don't. Even if you don't have that hot shoe, you can trigger one of these flashes because it will wait until it sees your camera's flash. And once it sees that your flash has taken a picture, it will fire and illuminate the whole room. So what I like to do is to take a flash like this and put it in the corner of the room and point it towards the ceiling. And then no matter where in the room I am, I can take a picture with the flash on. I can turn the flash down low with flash exposure compensation. And it will just be watching the whole time, waiting for me to take a picture, and then it will fire and fill up the room with light. It only costs about $30 and it can make a huge difference in your indoor pictures, especially for things like a birthday party where it might be dimly lit. Check it out at sdp.io/tt560 and check out Chapter 3 of Stunning Digital Photography and Chapter 6 for information on how to use a remote flash like that. If you want a tripod, which is great for self-portraits, for taking night photography, this is the tripod I suggest people start out with. You can go to sdp.io/tripod1 or sdp.io/dolica to check out this great tripod that's only $50. It's lightweight and it will be more than enough for the vast majority of people. Thanks so much for checking this out. Once again, I just want to remind you that I can show you all the buttons and dials in this video, but the real art of photography, the way you'll get amazing pictures that will wow people, is to learn composition and lighting and posing and expression, storytelling, all these intricacies of it that are also the most fun and non-technical parts of it. My book, Stunning Digital Photography, is designed to do all of that. You can buy it directly from me with worldwide shipping for under $10 at sdp.io/store in either paperback or ebook form with over 14 hours of video. Also, you can just subscribe to this channel to see a ton more free videos, 3 new videos every week, completely free. Share it with your friends. Once again, sdp.io/tutorials has more tutorials for different cameras. Please click like. Thanks.